viewers, and welcome back to another episode of Decoded, a Lost Codex podcast. I am your host, Jesse Stoutfire, the dark iron grandma you wished you never had. With me today is another special guest. She is very tired right now, but I am going to do my best to keep her awake and make her laugh. Welcome, Isei Silva. Isei, welcome back to Decoded.
When you said you were going to do a voice, I was not expecting that one.
Jesse Stoutfire is my dark iron grandma voice that I made up on the spot.
Is it like a planned joke on Mrs. Stoutfire?
It's an attempt.
It's an attempt. Oh my god, that should so be a thing. Okay.
Jesse, if I properly lower my voice and make it nice and soft, I can try and sound just like Mrs. Doubtfire, but we'll call her Stoutfire for copyright issues.
Reasons.
So I am your host, Jesse Stoutfire, Isei Silva from last week. And if you didn't watch last week, stop watching and go back and watch on last week. Isei, welcome back to Decoded, a Lost Codex podcast.
Thank you, Jesse, and happy to be back again.
Round two. Before we launch into the actual topic, we've got a little brief news to talk about. BlizzCon charity event sold out on Wednesday, so anyone who bought that, you are going to the BlizzCon charity event. It's something I've always wanted to do, is go to that charity event, and because you get to eat with the
They're
Blizzard
expensive
developers.
Tickets, aren't they, though?
They're $750 or something.
Wow, for that much money, just go to BlizzCon twice. 3 times even.
Part of me is like, it's for charity, but the other part is like, I don't have that money.
Right?
You do get like a piece of art to take home. Like, you do get a special artwork. I remember a guy at like BlizzCon 2014 on the way home in the airport, some guy tried to sell me his artwork from the charity dinner. In the airport.
How much?
He's like, I'll sell it to you for $200.
Scalping artwork?
Pretty much. And he's like, I gotta make my money back somehow. And it was StarCraft, and I was like, it's cool, but
that was an impulse buy. Does someone regret it?
Yeah, pretty much.
I know, but like, for that amount of money, you could just buy a BlizzCon ticket and be halfway there already.
Yeah. You could do a whole BlizzCon trip on $750. It depends where you stay and
right, yeah, depending on how far away you are. But yeah,
not eating anything.
That's the thing, though. What did they have? Do we know the menu? That's like I need to know to go to an event or not. What is being served?
Same. That was the last ticket sale day for BlizzCon, so tickets are now 100% sold out. But if you didn't get tickets, as I've said in my previous podcasts many times, don't panic, don't worry. The closer we get to BlizzCon, the more tickets will become available. So if you're listening to this and you didn't get tickets and you're kind of bummed, but you really want to go, don't give up. If you want to go to BlizzCon and you didn't get any tickets and you give up right now, you don't want to go bad enough. And I always tell people, LF BlizzCon, the Blizz Nerds group, there are always ways to get tickets. So if you don't have yours yet, don't feel bummed. There are ways. I've helped 5 people get tickets over the last week and a half. So don't worry. You still have time.
Exactly. If you really need those tickets, again, Jesse will probably help you out. You can always meet him at the back alley of the 7-Eleven. He'll tell you what to do.
What's 7-Eleven? There's like thousands in America. That just sounds like I hang out in sketchy places. I know I'm sketchy, but like not that sketchy. Jesus.
Are you?
Apparently on this news list, another piece of important news that I'm reading is there's a mule mount to talk about.
Yes.
I'm
very excited about that.
I didn't write this, so I'll let you talk about the mule mount.
Yes. If you're an equine lover out there, I know Blizzard has put out recent new horse mounts out there, which are gorgeous in their own right. But I, of course, gravitated towards the mule mount because if anybody knows me, especially on Tumblr, I love mules and donkeys. I love their long ears. I love how versatile and stout and strong they are, how brave they are, stubborn in their own right, but for a reason. And I always feel that they should have a special place in fantasy settings, again, especially with their long ears, because I'm sure elves must look at mules and they see them as the elf of the equine world. And I'm so excited to finally get my hands on a mule mount. And I think it's for both factions.
We don't have confirmation, but the suggestion of the files, it's called Chewed On Reigns of the Terrified Mule. And we were talking about that yesterday, and it sounds like it chewed itself free. It has been, and the flavor text of the mount talks about witches and how it's scared. So this could be something we find out in the middle. It doesn't sound like it's a vendor item. Thank
goodness, because I do not have money.
And if it was a vendor item from Culturas.
Transmog is true endgame, and I spent all my gold dressing up everybody in their most fashionable best. And that's why I don't have money.
And that's why Isei is poor. So if you play a moon guard and you have spare gold, give her some.
Send me some gold.
Or me too. And more important
you guys
news,
behind a 7-Eleven.
Jeez. There is a Lost Codex party behind a 7-Eleven. Right. We won't tell you which one. You gotta find
Lost Codex After Dark.
That's gonna be our rated R PG-18 podcast. Lost Codex After Dark.
Hopefully it still stays for both factions, and please give him a loving home.
We'll keep you guys posted on the mule news. The last news is something we're just gonna tease, but we can't mention. Before the Storm has been spoiled on Amazon. And Christy Golden, if you're listening right now, know that I did not go and read those spoilers. I am a sucker for spoilers. When spoilers in game come out, I pry the files like an animal. I'm like Gandalf in that one scene in Lord of the Rings where he's got all the papers around. That's me. I am researching left, right, and center. But when it comes to book spoilers, I can't do it. And I could not ruin the book for me, Christy. So don't worry. Before the Storm has not been spoiled. I've seen blips here and there, mostly pictures of thumbnails on clickbait on YouTube, but I don't know the context of it. And if someone else is listening...
I've been bad. I have read some of those spoilers, and of course I can't talk about... I'm not going to talk about it here.
Isei really wants to talk about it, and I told her...
Because I love spoilers so bad.
Normally I'm the same. I'm the same way, but...
It's like, before I watched Game of Thrones, I just sat down and looked up all the spoilers, and I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to watch. I don't like the surprise. I like the build-up.
Fair. For me... Especially in a book, I need to be surprised at some things, because in a lot of stories it's easy to see what's coming. So I love being surprised in a book. TV show is a little bit different. I don't know how I feel about TV show spoilers, but I couldn't do it Before the Storm. If the Amazon employee who put the ending of the book is listening, why? Who hurt you?
Shame on you.
Who hurt you in life that you had to do this?
Because they should have known it's an ending.
Not only did...
It's not like they just picked a random page and, oops, it happened to have some major spoilers in it. It's the ending.
They put the epilogue in. How? Who does that?
You can't get more ending than that.
Come on, Amazon. All right, so if you want to know what happens Before the Storm, and there's apparently some doozies, some game changers.
I can't wait until it comes out so I can gush and talk about some of them, because a few of those... One in my head right now, particularly, that I'm not going to talk about, I'm going to keep it quiet, has changed my viewpoint on a certain topic forever.
And we'll have to read it. 6 podcasts on that, so we can talk about it.
Right.
We'll get Christy Golden in here, and we'll just gush with her about it. We'll talk about the book with her. But moving on to today's topic. What's today's topic?
Oh my goodness. If you guys haven't had enough Draenei on the last podcast.
We're not doing Draenei. No one cares about Draenei. No one cares ever about Draenei. No one likes them. Said no one ever. We're talking about Draenei today. Holy crap. And if you don't like Draenei.
More Draenei.
If you don't like Draenei, why are you listening to this podcast?
It's funny because Draenei are one of the most popular races.
But no one talks about them.
Warcraft. And almost nobody talks about them.
Well, we're here
to change that. We're here to change that.
We go. Now, a little forewarning. Isei and I are just going to go off on this. She is just shaking out her seat to get launched into this topic. A lot of this is going to be about lore and facts, but a lot of these are going to be headcanons, and we're going to do our best to throw in our headcanons and make it obvious it's our headcanon, because we don't want to tell you guys something's canon and it's not.
Yeah.
So,
and it's less like off the wall headcanons. It's more piecing things together in a sense of like, wouldn't it make sense if this and that?
yes, using what we've got and filling in the blanks kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is half the fun with Blizzard until they totally ruin everything and con it 6 years later.
Until they come in, it's like, nope, everything's wrong.
Just
red pen.
Nuke the planet. Speaking of planets, we're going to start with in the beginning with the Titans. The Titans did not stumble across Argus's dormant world soul ever. That we know of, at least. There's no record.
Did it just not get to him on time, or is it just completely overlooked? Was that ever detailed?
Well, I think even though the Pantheon is massive, they are these living celestial clouds. Mm-hmm. Distance is still a big thing. That's literally what stopped Sargeras from getting to Azeroth forever. Was literally he just didn't want to walk.
Too far away.
He was just lazy.
Too far.
He's like, what do you mean there's no Uber in this area? Like, he tried to Uber and it didn't work.
That's expensive.
Well of Eternity exploded, and that was, that happened. So it could just be that they didn't stumble across it, which, leads to a whole nother can of worms. How many other planets are there have a Titan soul? Because if they miss...
Because not all of them do.
No. They come across Draenor, for example. The Titans didn't come across Draenor. One did. Agrimar came across Draenor, saw that there was no Titan soul within, but still did his business there. And so...
You make it sound like he just dropped his can.
Well... He dropped a giant seed. He dropped a giant bulb, and that turned into the botany and all that stuff. I'm not wrong. I just paraphrased very grotesquely.
It just created an imagery. It's like, well, since there's no Titan soul here, can't get the spot go to waste.
Zip. Okay. Draenor isn't until next week, Isei. Come on, stick to the schedule. Okay, so the Titans did not find Argus that we know of. They passed over it, and were the Draenei aware of...
Maybe it was too young. It was so fleeting, infant, that it didn't feel like anything was there.
We know that Azeroth's World Soul is exceptionally powerful. And we get a glimpse of how the World Souls work in the 1,000-Year War audio drama when she's getting the vision, and it says Argus started off as this swirling vortex of energy, found himself close to a sun, a planet formed around him to keep warm, stuff like that. So it could have been that it was still early stages. And
I always had this little question of how Titan souls are born from the planet, and I'm kind of half scared it's going to be a chest buster scenario.
Like Alien, just...
In which case, it was probably wrong to stop Sargeras.
It's going to end horribly for us. Just the planets from the maelstrom, just... Right. This horrible shrieking, like a balloon coming...
Giant heads are just burst out of hunger.
But the original question that I guess we kind of wonder with Argus is, were the Draenei aware of the Titan soul? And by no means were they 100% aware, or is it confirmed they were aware? There's mention of Thalkiel doing something with some machines. And the quote comes from the Warlock class Hullbook, and it says, "The Magi summoned arcane constructs to help build the architecture of Argus's capital, while Thalkiel himself devised machines to focus the planet's latent arcane energies." Now, that doesn't really mean anything. That just means, you think of ley lines, you think of stuff like that. But the specific words of machines to focus the planet's latent arcane energies, that is a theme we see heavily in Chronicle 1 with the Titan Forged. And although that involved a wounded Azeroth with the Well of Eternity, this gaping wound after Yasharaj was ripped out, they have the Forge of Wills and the Forge of Reorigination, where the Titan Keepers kind of create this symphony between them, and there's this kind of synchronization between them that basically...
Is that just they're learning?
They're learning, but I also think...
It's each world kind of like a trial and error, kind of?
Well, that's like a huge can of worms of the Titan Keepers, not the Titans themselves, but the Titan Keepers doing this, obviously doing them on the Titans' orders. Yeah. But this synchronization between the two machines was to regulate the heartbeat and the energy of Azeroth, but it could have been to learn as well. And when I read this line of Thalkiel devising machines to focus the planet's latent arcane energies, I was reminded of the same machines the Titan Forge use. Obviously, there's no connection because Thalkiel wasn't visited by the Titans in the aspect that the Titan Keepers obviously were created. But I found it interesting, and I kind of wonder, was Thalkiel's machines, were they drawing upon this arcane heartbeat that was coming from the center of the planet? And so it might
have been probably in a very, quote unquote, primitive way as far as Titan constructs go. So he knew it was there, and he knew what to build or how to build it in order to collect it.
He knew that there was a lot of arcane. I don't think he knew that there was a world soul, but I think that he knew that there was a vast amount of power, and he devised these specific machines that focused the internal energies of arcane within. And maybe, Thalkiel knew more than what he lets on. Maybe he was on the breakthrough of something before everything kind of...
He knew something was there. He just didn't know what it was. And he could have also named it something else. Again, world souls, titans, constructs, things like that. These are just names that we know now how to name each thing we see that is recognizable as such. Thalkiel probably didn't know. He could have made up his own names regarding it, and it could be the same thing.
Something that just came to mind. Mm-hmm. Thalkiel reaches out into the twisting nether in search of power, and he plumbs the great dark, and he gets an answer. And we assume it's Sargeras. Some voice responds. It teaches him how to summon demons. It doesn't say it's Sargeras, but it's, people...
When it comes to demons, most likely.
It's not the void. And I wonder if when this voice reached out to Thalkiel, if they had this conversation and Thalkiel was telling this voice, there's this, I'm not satisfied with Argus and I'm not satisfied with the power. There's a lot of power here I don't understand, so I need more power to understand it. And there's almost this heartbeat here. And that makes Sargeras go, say what? There's a what there? There's a heartbeat? What if Thalkiel is the reason Sargeras learned of the world soul? What
inadvertently
if just he accidentally, like you said, he had these names and he had these own words and he name dropped, and Sargeras was kind of going,
exactly. Sargeras would know what to look for. Thalkiel would probably have no idea what he has.
And maybe Sargeras was suggestively saying, well, do you think it sounds like a heartbeat? And Thalkiel's like, actually, yeah, it does sound like a heartbeat. And Sargeras is like, holy shit, I gotta get there. And man, this just came to me right now. This is literally an on-the-spot headcanon. Thalkiel did not tell Sargeras there was a Titan soul, but I'm starting to wonder...
He's probably talking out loud.
He's trying
to make sense of what this is, what he found, and he just inadvertently spilled the beans.
Huh. Neat. That's a cool theory.
Could be a way to kind of not redeem Thalkiel, but not condemn him either.
Interesting. Titan souls is an interesting topic. I wish we knew more about them. Moving on.
We'll get to that. We'll do a podcast about Titan souls.
We'll do 6 of them on Titan souls. One for every Titan.
Right.
The planet itself. Now, we know of Makari. We know Makari is a lot bigger than the actual zone in game. You can see the planet curling up in the distance. And I think Blizzard did a really good job of...
Really cool. I love... Everyone is taking screenshots of it because... we were just all tourists at the end of the world, just taking screenshots. Oh my god, everyone's gonna love this.
This is a destroyed place and it's amazing. Click, click, click.
Click.
And so Makari was massive. The Draenei, we see Shatrath and Draenor and how big it is. So we know they build on massive scales, and we can assume, even though they're not a numerous...
And comparatively, the Shatrath is teeny tiny.
Oh, very tiny.
Makari.
But compared to other places, Shatrath was massive for a city. It was the
For Draenor.
For Draenor.
Shatrath was massive. For Makari,
It was
that might have been a neighborhood.
not even like a street maybe.
Yeah.
And we know that the Draenei and the Eredar built these vast structures, and you can imagine these cranes and these scaffolding, but they specifically say Thalkil uses arcane constructs to build these. So a lot of it is just magically made, which allows them to be elaborate and crazy in their architecture design. But big question
Good,
is...
not to Suramar as well. They have amazing architecture, and it's mostly based on their magical mastery.
Same with Silvermoon. Elves and Draenei are very similar. But aside from Makari, are there other cities?
Most likely there is. They're just not mentioned for X reasons that we don't know currently, but we can probably safely compare the sizes of Argus to Azeroth. Again, we have no other comparison to, so we have to assume Argus, Draenor, and Azeroth are about the same size roughly. So if Makari is just a city, it's most likely to assume there are other cities, there's other continents, probably other masses of land out there that we just don't see. Argus is shattered, so there probably are huge missing chunks there.
Back in time, we think of before we got to Argus in 7.3, we just thought of Argus and Makari, of what it once was, what the Eredar lived there. We didn't think of this fell planet just yet. And if you think about, if you take the spot of the Night Elves and you talked, Mr. Night Elf, where do you come from? Back when the Night Elves had their empire, and they say, oh, we Night Elves come from Azeroth, and our city was Zinajari. And you think about it, that's a good way to describe the Night Elves. They come from the capital city of Zinajari, and they come from Azeroth. But
you'd want to say Zinajari, you want to name drop like that.
You would want to. But think about the rest of the actual continent, of how much isn't part of the Night Elves. Ulduar and the Titan Keepers, Zandalar, the Mogu Empire that was going on in the south, the Mantid, all the Titan prisons.
And most of these were happening at the same time. But just they were so separated, they were each kind of living in their own little niche in the world.
And because Night Elves were the dominant empire at the time, you could argue that they were the rulers of Azeroth.
Yeah.
So now take the same example.
Why mention anyone else? You're the most important person there.
Exactly. So I wonder, is that the same for the Draenei? Were there other civilizations and other parts of the world that were going on that the Draenei, or rather the Eredar, hadn't conquered or hadn't explored or didn't care for, or just not their territories?
Well, I think we can safely assume there are other cities. There are the masses of land, most likely that the Eredar had settled in. Makari is just being the capital and or the largest city thereof.
Right.
Now, whether the Draenei or Eredar, we call them Eredar?
We call them
Eredar because we're back in time. We're in Eredar time. Whether they shared these land masses with other sentient creatures, that is not determined.
There's surprisingly, and I guess this comes down to Blizzard as like a game design. They're not going to, right now, for example, in Battle for Azeroth, we are revealed that there's a species called the Tortolan and the Sethrak. And they've always the Volpera. They've always been there, but we've never heard of them before. And so people say, why have I never heard of a Tortolan before? Well, the real answer is because Blizzard just made it up. But the lore reason is maybe there was no reason for you to know. They only lived on these islands. And so Blizzard hasn't come up with the other civilizations of Argus yet, maybe never will. And so we can only speculate at this point. There could have been nothing. There could have been massive other species. And people might say, why didn't Blizzard tell us now? The answer is they haven't invented it. And people get mad when Blizzard invents new lore, but it's like they didn't establish the entire lore back in the 90s and then build it. They
always leave an open end to further build upon.
Exactly. And like, for example, the best example is the Broken Isles. Originally, the Broken Isles were just raised islands from the ocean via Gul'dan. in Legion, we find out that he only raised the Broken Shore, and that the rest of the Broken Isles had cultures of their own, the Vrykul, the High Mountain, Suramar. And I think that's a lot better.
And not that these are like changes or retcons or anything like that importantly, in the sense that, you know, history does pass down word of mouth, hand to hand, and it's written, and details do change. Not to say it was incorrect, but it just could have been altered as these text, tomes, and stories were passed down through generations.
And I think that's the best way to take some of this lore, in that, you know, the Eredar may have documented all these other species and civilizations, but maybe it was lost when they left Argus. Maybe the stories were lost and we don't know. So, you know, there is mention of a bovine beast that the Eredar hunted for sport, and this could just be flavor text, but when you're in your garrison on Draenor, there is I think it's when you have the PvP building, I didn't have that. As Alliance, it's this giant. Fair enough. It's this giant Draenei, and he's dual wielding shields, I think, and he's just a really angry Draenei.
Oh, I remember that. That was really cool.
And he's actually using like the vigilante shields. Yes,
it's badass. Now I so wanted like a warrior spec for that.
Yes, right? Dual wielding shields would be dope.
Oh god.
And you
can't do any damage, but you're unkillable.
And he specifically tells you to go hunt different horde races. And when you click on the Tauren, he makes reference of Tauren resembling these bovine beasts that the Draenei or Eredar hunted for sport on Argus.
But here's the thing: we cannot also assume that these bovine beasts that he mentioned were sentient. They could be, as he mentioned, beasts. He didn't say bovine people. He said bovine beasts.
Yes.
They could still be very much animals that, of course, they did hunt for sport, as almost any other race does.
He literally just could have been talking about cows. Like it could have been just buffaloes, Argusian buffaloes.
Because we do see that there are shared animals between different planets. Mm-hmm. Draenor and Azeroth share wolf-like, or wolves in general. So who's to say that maybe that there's actual cows on Argus?
That's the only mention we have before we get to Argus. There is obviously...
I mean, also as well, like, I think one of the jokes of the male Draenei is that he gets really excited about seeing cows.
Oh no! Oh no!
Cows and chickens. Like, oh my god! Maybe he's just having a nostalgia attack.
This is not Decoded After Dark. You say we can't go here yet.
No! What are you implying? I'm just saying he gets excited for seeing cows, like you see a dog.
All right.
I get excited when I see dogs. Like, I point at it like, oh my god, a dog.
True. Maybe he just, or he's just a bad tourist. He points at things he doesn't understand, and just like, what is? Imagine how awkward Draenei would have been on Azeroth. What is that? And it's like, shh, don't yell. Like, they can hear you. And he's like pointing at a gnome, and the gnome's just scowling, like, you're so small. Why are you so small? And it's like, oh god.
It's like a baby. It's a lost baby.
You don't ask people why they're so small.
That's just how tall they get.
That's a full grown gnome. Why? Why is it full grown?
They must have. I mean, if under the assumption that the Draenei were the only dominant sentient race on Argus, having to come to a planet, be it Draenor or be it Azeroth, that has numerous sentient races must have been actually a little confusing for them.
Very.
They were probably going, okay, who is the dominant people we talk to here?
Who do we tell that? Who do we speak to take over? This is our planet now. Our technology is better. You still have stone castles. Move over. But then they crashed and it doesn't work.
That's the thing. But so far we know Draenei, so far, the only dominant sentient race on Argus until Blizzard says otherwise.
I know people don't want a time travel expansion ever again. People said, screw it, and it's awful for Warlords. I say, screw it, let's go back to Argus.
I don't know if I want a time travel expansion back to Argus. I just want a time traveling people that can just kind of peer through. And
no, if we're gonna go back to Argus and we're gonna see Argus as we saw Draenor, we need to see it in its prime. And I don't
They
know
could
how...
give us a little more, like, flashbacks.
I agree.
They were great. They were great. I just wanted more of an everyday life kind of thing rather than screaming abject horror and terror.
That I would love to, and I'm, you know, obviously I'm skeptical about how time travel expansions could work in the future, but I would love to see Argus in its absolute prime. I would love to go to
Or even a hollow core that has the history of Argus.
That'd be cool as an episode.
And it would, and you could click on it and it'll give you like a little cutscene, like 2 minutes or so, and then you just click on it over and over again. That'd be beautiful.
I don't think
It's get your Draenei fix.
I don't think Blizzard would do it unless it's a base expansion.
Yeah.
All right,
I don't know.
so dominant species in Argus, we can assume that that would be the Eredar. Now, Eredar culture is fascinating because when they came out in BC, we knew nothing. They
had nothing.
They were shoehorned in, and that is not a pun. That is nothing to do with shoes.
They were horseshoe horned in.
They had these really cool concept designs with like the layered clothing.
They were fancy Protoss. Everybody knew this. Fancy Protoss.
Fancy Protoss is what we'll call them. But they had nothing. And that's where headcanon is. And if you listen to last week's episode, we talked about Jed'hin. We'll do a quick summary of Jed'hin. And actually, we're going to talk about another headcanon sport of Isei's called Gunjika. So give a quick summary of Jed'hin and then tell everyone about Gunjika.
Okay, so I'm sure everyone knows by now, Jed'hin, it is the Draenei wrestling sport that started back in Wrath. It really picked up speed, and now you guys can actually play it on Makari. You jump on a fighter, or in a fighter, and go have fun, bash heads, kick ass, take names. While Jed'hin was kind of picking up speed within guilds, my friends and I decided to do another sport. And there was one that I called Gunjika, and it was a Draenei Talbuk race. But you don't actually ride on the Talbuk. The idea is there'd be a team of 4, 2 in front of a Talbuk, 2 behind a Talbuk. Talbuk would be blindfolded, and you're supposed to race your Talbuk across a large field without losing grip on the Talbuk the entire time. You could lose your grip as you were running, but in order for it to count as a win, all team members must have their hands on the Talbuk when crossing the finish line. I do have a few links that better explains this. There is a little bit of artwork by Rurukatt, so kudos to her. Lost kudos to her.
Lost kudos.
And lost kudos to her. So you guys can find more information about that. We did try to play it out in-game. However, we did find out that it was too FPS dependent. This was when hunters, they had their pet at their side, but the pet would move ahead of the hunter. Lagging was the big issue, so we downsized the teams from 4 to 2. But even then, the other player was uncertain whether to follow the pet or follow the hunter. Anyways, a lot of different issues came up, and so we dropped it. It just did not translate well in game. But a lot of people did kind of sort of accepted it as a headcanons for their character, especially if they were more oriented into Talbuk racing or Talbuk breeding, or they were just Talbuk enthusiasts as well. So that is also in something that they also can pick up.
And the thing that's interesting is both Jed'hin and Gunjika started off as headcanon ideas, and Jed'hin is now canon.
Yes.
For those who did miss last week's episode, it was an RP headcanon sport that was only played by RPers because it was made up by Isei here. And in Argus's patch, Blizzard canonized it as official. So it is now an official sport. Gunjika is not, but it's one of those levels of headcanon that there's no reason it can't be. Especially since we learned that Talbuks come from Argus. They're not a Draenei species. They were called Chitinbuks back in the day, and they looked way different horn styles, covered in scales and hard plates.
But it's good to see how the Talbuk have evolved since Argus.
It's very interesting.
I mean, if you see their Draenor, I guess, Outland counterparts from Argus to Draenor to Outland, I guess, they've evolved a lot. And it's been, 25,000 years? Mm-hmm. It's easy for a species to change in that time. Especially since, if we would compare it to an equine-ish breed, they'd be maximum lifespan about 30 years, 30, 40 maybe?
Maybe, yeah.
You go through thousands of generations by then.
And it was cool that Blizzard just didn't use the Draenei models. They didn't use the thick, muscular Arnold Schwarzenegger Talbot models that we saw in Warlords. They developed whole new ones that...
They did. Their horns are a little more curved as well.
More curved, more, way more ancient looking and a lot less fleshy. And I thought it was interesting to see. And I was like, you know what? I like this. Kind of makes you wonder why they didn't bring other creatures, like where, I guess, in a way, did they? I just thought of something, the mana rays.
It could also be a shared
species.
Shared species, like in the wolf and boars.
Because specifically the mana rays are native to Argus, but that
breeder of mana ray as well.
Nether, were there any rays on Draenei?
The Nether rays, right?
They were called, or were they the bats, the spore bats?
The spore bats, yeah. Okay,
so Nether rays and mana rays and Nether rays are two.
But there's also this thing called Convergent Evolution. Convergent Evolution is when two unassociated species, completely different species, develop the same traits to fit within the same ecological niche. Most notable example of this is in real life, the wing, such as the bats, the birds, and bugs. They all learned how to fly, have nothing to do with each other species-wise. So it could also be that either they could be just shared species. Again, the Titans just created similar species on each planet to see how would they evolve in each different environment, or again, it could be just convergent evolution. Had nothing to do with each other, but they just happened to evolve the same way.
The Nether rays are the ones from Draenei, are the ones with the scary teeth that look like flying floppy disks, and the mana rays are the big bat ones from Argus. And we see that there's Nether rays actually on the planet of Bonish or Bonik.
Yes.
The giant tree planet that we do the invasions on, and they fly around there. So it could just be similar evolutions in that. I'm looking at the models right now. Nether Ray on Draenei and the mana ray from Argus look nothing alike. So they are separate species, but they do. There could be a connection somewhere.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how different they were looking at them side by side. So. The only thing similar is the word ray.
I like to think it was kind of like either the Titans kind of reusing animals and species that have worked pretty well on different planets. Or in Convergent Evolution is also a fun idea. It does look kind of like Convergent Evolution then. They look nothing alike. I don't think they even share a similar genetic ancestor. But they just have filled a niche, which is a flying, fleshy-like creature that probably flies more by inflating itself with air and making itself lighter, and probably just nibbling on anything it can. Bugs, probably eats birds. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we have Eredar culture with the with Talbuks, and we know that the Talbuks were obviously a huge part of Eredar culture. As species that they, sort of looking for, that they domesticated. They obviously brought them with them when they left. We'll talk about that later. Eredar technology is something that's always, that we never really saw in BC. We never saw it when it was first introduced because it was always Naru technology. And this concept of Eredar technology, Draenei technology, really shone when Warlords came out. We got to see how actually technological they were.
Yes, and that was actually one of the most exciting things about Warlords of Draenei, especially if you were a Draenei lover up to that point and beyond. It wasn't so much, hey, we get to visit the Orc homeworld, is that, oh my goodness, we're finally going to see the Draenei as they were. And it got everybody so excited, myself included. And I did get an early like beta pass for it. And I did nothing. I did not do any of the quests. I just went from city to city, screenshots, and just wrote down everything.
Amazing. That's the kind of beta testers that I
went the anthropological way. It's like, oh yeah, I have to test, for bugs, and they're like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do that. But let me just go check this town first and just see what that's all about.
Let me see what kind of food stalls they've got.
Like, oh
food trucks.
God, the stalls, the markets, how they cook their food. There's the little inns. My favorite thing in the markets is the little like spice racks they have.
Yes.
And there's a lot. The farms as well. They grow their own food, and you have to wonder whether this is plants that they brought from their travels, or if they are implementing whatever they found on Draenor.
I hate to be the taste tester, as you said earlier.
I know, right? And you have to get kudos. Lost kudos.
Lost kudos.
Lost kudos to those Draenei, those brave Draenei, that it had to taste test a lot of different ingredients, meats, plants, fruits, from various planets that they first landed on to ensure it was not poisonous.
I'm sure that's where the Rengari, they had to have found a way to do that.
Thank the Rengari, that were probably the ones that observed animals and what they ate, and that was probably their lead on what was safe to eat. I'm sure there were probably some upset stomachs along the way.
Definitely. Don't want to talk about Draenei toilets, even though you have your own sketching of Draenei toilets.
I do have a headcanon on Draenei toilets! Let's trace back. We'll come back to Draenei toilets. We got to leave everyone just wanting more. We have, you and I talked about Draenei toilets at BlizzCon for like an hour. We did, and I have a thing written about Draenei toilet with visuals. There's visuals.
Okay, we'll come back to it. I promise we'll come back to Draenei toilets. We'll talk about it on Chatrath. We'll talk about it. No pun intended there. No pun intended about Draenor or Chatrath or Agrimar doing his business or whatever. Let's move on to technology. Okay. Just because people are going to be like, what was that bit about Draenei toilets? Don't worry about it. You'll find out. You will find out. I guarantee you. We have to give him a reason to come back for episode 2.
Come back, clickbait them with Draenei toilets.
That's going to be that name of next time. Decoded episode 6, Draenei toilets. Mm-hmm. Their technology, we see Argonite powers everything. They've got electricity, streetlights. It's used in magical regions.
How much can you call it electricity when it is powered by crystals? It's more battery. It's
true. I was more so in the concept of it's a powered light source, not actual conducted electricity. Okay. But very true. They've got batteries everywhere that power shield technologies, and they're the mechs, both the big mechs and the little mechs, magical reagents, everything. They've got, as you said, you and I talked about before, holograms. They have holograms. Yes. They've got
maybe even a sort of like quote unquote, in a very light sense, hard light technology, because the holograms are pretty solid.
They are, and I really wish we got to see more of the Draenei or Eredar technology. We see, and actually we do see the satellite defense systems with the in Chatrath, the floating crystals that blast aerial threats out of the air. Mm-hmm. Like, they've weaponized these crystals as well.
They do.
And what was really fun in the Eredar episodes that Jeff and I did was to talk about the magical bond between the magic users on Argus and the Artificers, these engineers, these technological geniuses who use this technology for everything. And we see that with they've got siege weapons. They've got, their weapons light up, which is cool, and with the magical technology, we see the vigilance come into play via the Wakeners, after Thalkiel. And it brings up the whole concept that the Eredar practice soul binding, soul magic.
Yes. And oh my God, you and I also talked about a lot about, Alcadoon. as well.
Auchindoun is one of my favorite concepts from Draenor. And to kind of give a little teaser, what you and I
enter Auchindoun as well, when it was after all we've known before it was just shattered shell.
The music in there.
And then we see it in its glory, what it really was.
I feel that
the music in it was amazing, top notch. It really got you in the mood.
I'm gonna tell Jeff to play the music at this part right now. So you guys are listening to the music right now at this part of the podcast, because the music in Auchindoun, I know we just planet hopped from Argus to Draenor, but the relation is there because aside from the awe of Auchindoun, the concept of soul binding, and when you think of soul magic in Azeroth and WoW, it's not a good thing. It's never a good thing. It's always a bad thing. Soul magic is a negative thing, but the Eredar didn't see it as that. They found a way to preserve their own kind in constructs. It was a vigilant Koram he worked at the observatory and he didn't want to die, so they took his body away, or when he died or got close to age, we don't know what happened, his soul was put into a giant mechanical construct, and he maintained his personality. He was just as sassy and arrogant and awesome, but
which I do want to see him as he were when he was alive.
That would be so cool to see.
We don't, and I am left to wonder. I want to see him in his full sassy living glory.
See, this is why we need to go time travel back to Argus.
We do.
See? Another reason for the list.
You're just convincing me more and more.
We'll call it the Vindicators of Argus instead of the Warlords of Draenor. The Vindicators. And so the Vigilants are these mechanical constructs that are powered by Argonite, but house these souls within them, and it's not a bad thing. And that was kind of even though it was way before Azeroth's time, it's this magical breakthrough of there is a way to work with souls and not a negative aspect.
And I do remember as well, while we were talking about Auchindoun, especially last BlizzCon, we talked about the role of Draenei monk, how they kind of differed from what we know as a class base, and how they may have been used, what their roles may have been in Auchindoun, and how to quiet restless souls, how to transfer souls. How do you move a soul from one place, from its body to a construct, from one place to another? And I did think about the Draenei monks, the movements, the very fluid-like movements that we see even with the Pandaren. Yeah, with the Pandaren monks, that dance-like movement, it can be used to kind of channel around the plasmatic aura that follows the soul, and they can kind of just move it around to transfer the soul without disturbing it.
It could be a matter of
recently, like siphon or pulled soul might be something that's very, very delicate. It went from being alive to a state of death. It's probably in a transitional state, and if you were one of the monks enrolled of transferring a soul to a vigilante, to a vigilant construct, you would probably have to be very, very delicate and very, very good at it.
It's a matter of, like, to support this headcanon again, this whole idea of Draenei monks, especially with Auchindoun, because we see Auchinai monks in Outland. This whole concept that Isei and I are talking about is a headcanon. We don't know for sure, but
we don't. And I do hope it kind of inspires people with Draenei monks in the sense like, oh, I never really saw them that way. That would be really cool. And at least you can base them off kind of like that to give them a role, a purpose for Draenei monk. And then if you want to say, hey, well, they learn more the martial sense of it, perfectly fine. Go have fun. Go nuts.
What I think's interesting is going to the whole soul magic is not a natural thing. It is not a toy to be fiddled with. So the Eredar or the Draenei came up with this way to, when the soul is torn from the body, warlocks do it very viciously. They rip it out.
They ripped it out, yeah.
But it's almost like this. How else do you?
Because they didn't care. They didn't care about
the fabric of the soul,
emotional state of the soul. They just for them, soul was a power source.
And probably the more emotional.
And the more emotionally disturbed, the more power probably released.
But it begs the question of how do you rip a soul from a body? Maybe there is no other way in that it is always going to be
It's probably always going to be violent in a way.
And so that's the role of the monk, and they dance around and they calm it and soothe it. Because, Quoram could be like, yes, of course I will become a vigilant. Yes, of course I'm down for this. Take my damn soul. But then when they rip the soul out, the soul as its own spirit is screaming. It's suddenly this,
it
oh God.
Is. And this also might be a reason why a lot of the monks kind of went insane. Imagine if you're surrounded by these wailing souls and your job is to calm them down, make them find peace, talk to them. Years and years, decades of it probably can wear down your own mental state as well. Being a Draenei monk, especially in Alkandun or even on Argus, whatever crypt they had at the time, it was probably a short-lived career.
And very traumatic. Very, yes. and especially you could argue that the Draenei monks use the light and use the belief in the Naru to kind of soothe that sort of
that may have
trauma.
Helped them a lot.
But what about the Eredar? Was it a more magical process? Was there a transition in their beliefs? We'll cover that with the transition from Argus to Draenor. But technology was a huge part of Argus, we see. And with the mention of mechanical constructs, we come to the hierarchy, and we learn from, I believe it was a world quest, that there's caste systems.
There is. I think in one of the world quests, and correct me if I'm wrong, where you have to kill those little mini-mechs that are running around. They did mention that they were used by the nobility.
You actually have
to protect their properties, their estates.
You have to empower them, actually.
You do empower them. You don't kill them. You kill the big ones, because they always get in your way.
They're obnoxious, but you're supposed to empower the little ones, and they're supposed to be distractions against the Legion. They're supposed to be nuisances, and Velen makes comment that they were household guards. It was like, maybe it could have been like a craze. It could have been a trend.
Could have been a trend, yeah.
When
like a Roomba.
Like a Roomba. It could have been when the Vigilants were made by High Awakener Argon, who was the replacement for after Thalkiel was deposed. We don't know what came first, the little mechs or the big mechs, but after, let's say he built the big mechs first, the whole soul binding business. What if just some successful Awakener, some, wanting to profit Awakener was like, that's a cool idea.
Not only that, but
let's make smaller versions.
They may have been protecting knowledge as well. It's like, I have this this competitor, and I have access tomes, crystals with very sensitive information, and I'm half worried he's going to sneak by and steal them from me or take them. This is very competitive.
Especially in a society based around the pursuit and advancement of knowledge.
So the mini constructs could be just guards for their most valuable source, which was knowledge. They probably weren't protecting land. They weren't protecting golds or gems. It was protection of libraries of whatever crystals that they had.
And especially, I think we see there's a little pet from Draenor. You can get like a little baby version of the mechs.
And even mini mech.
And I think they talk about like they're good for herding Talbuk. So to me, I have this like little image in my head of them being this pristine guards for the noble caste of the Eredar for technology. They're just these protectors, and then later on with the Draenei, everyone has them. Farmers have them, and
became a huge fad.
Kids have little action figure versions of them. Everyone has a little mech. And with the talk of hierarchies and noble caste, we've come to the Ogari. The Ogari were split into three different sects: the Scholars, the Awakeners, and the Consulate. What was unfortunate is we never really got an explanation of what the scholars and what the consulate did. No, we can assume.
They seemed really parallel as well.
The Wakeners and the consulate, you and I talked at length about this when I was writing that script. And all we know is Arch-Consul Valara, she is Archimon's second. You actually fight her in that world quest in Makari. She's the middle lady when you fight the other three. And it says that she invented the shield technology that the Draenei still use to this day. So she was a smart cookie back in the day. But it doesn't really talk about it talks about her and the advancement of
and her accomplishments, but not as for the Wakeners as a whole.
Exactly.
Or very, very little. So we know what she did, and this one amazing thing she did.
We know
what about a normal Wakener? What was their role? What did they do?
With Argon leading the Wakeners, and her name is Arch-Consul, she led the consulate. We know what they did, but again, it seems like they were almost just not too similar, very parallel, and they worked alongside each other, which I guess.
Or maybe to an Eredar or to a Draenei, they actually had very different roles, but we as humans just don't see it. Maybe we in our really undeveloped minds, we see it as, this is super similar. But maybe an Eredar would say, no, these are completely different. Yeah,
it could just be an answer as simple as that, in that they are so...
Maybe we're not smart enough to understand.
Literally, though, like there are, like you ask an Eredar, you could be like, so, like, tell me, really? Consulate, Wakeners, aren't they the same thing? And then
trying to explain the difference between pink and salmon and coral as far as colors go. Almost everyone else would say they look exactly the same. But to any interior designer, to any artist, they'll be like, oh, no, these are completely different colors.
I could just picture two Draenei, like two humans saying, like, really, what's the difference? And two Draenei, like, looking at each other going...
Like, gobsmacked.
Really? They just, like, shake their heads like, you really? You don't know the difference between the consulate and the Wakeners? Okay, don't worry about it, little human. We couldn't possibly explain to you.
Don't hurt yourself.
Don't hurt yourself. So, as much as... And the scholars, I have this headcanon with the scholars. And it's not crazy. It's not a crazy... It's just... There's nothing wacky about it. But we hear about the, Kil'jaeden and Velen both being these pursuers of knowledge. And I almost have this idea that they were part of the scholars' order at one point. There's mention of Kil'jaeden's... you would think of someone as powerful as Kil'jaeden would have this massive archive of knowledge. And we know that Velen was a wicked, powerful mage back in the day. Like, he was top of his class. Him and Kil'jaeden were top stuff. But Velen's specialty, he became interested in the Naru artifacts. And artifacts that were left by the Naru long ages past, he was like, these are cool. I want to learn about these. Yeah. And we know...
Anything think that's new and something new to learn is probably very exciting for an Eredar, for Draenei.
Very, especially...
It's so in their nature to just know and to want to know. That is their entire drive as a species, at least for the most part. They just want to know, and they want to know more.
Especially as a long-lived species.
Yeah.
It's just...
We have time to learn.
When something new pops up, they're like, whoa, where has this been this whole time? We have the time to learn. So it's, I wish we kind of learned more about the scholars and the consulate, but maybe one day when we go back to Argus. Other orders on Argus, we know the Vindicators existed. And this was I remember a big debate amongst role players.
And this was Vindicators before they received their light powers as well. So the Vindicators have been around for quite a long time.
But we don't know. We can assume there's no light power. And Isei and I were talking.
At this time, they're most likely not light-based.
Velen was a bit of a weirdo in studying the Narus.
Now, were they arcane-based? Did they have different types of powers?
Were their weapons... True, were they just mages and plate?
Armor is infused with arcane. We don't know.
Very well could have been, I think, of like riot police kind of stuff. The only mention of Vindicators on Argus and it was a voice recorded line. So it's not just a little bit of flavor text that got overlooked. It was a voice recorded line by Thalkiel. And what's interesting, and a little bit of a side reference to this, but Thalkiel talks. He's one of the artifacts who talks a lot. And when you go to the Court of Stars, Court of Stars? Yeah, Court of Stars, there's a boss there called Talaxei, and she's the fire Eredar, the one that people wiped on.
Yeah.
And when you've got Thalkiel there, he makes comment to her. Now, she's a fell, corrupted Eredar. She's obviously evil. She's with the Legion. But what's interesting is she wasn't corrupted by Sargeras with Kil'jaeden and Archimonde. She was Thalkiel's student. And what he says, well, if it isn't my particle student, Talaxei. She was missing when the Vindicators put me in chains and slew the rest of my disciples. I look forward to witnessing her death. So when Archimonde and the Vindicators came for Thalkiel to arrest him, she was already one of his students, and she was already practicing the Fel. And she vanished after that for X amount of years. Then Sargeras reappears on Argus, corrupts Kil'jaeden and Archimonde, and at some point in time, she joins then. And it's really interesting because she's, as far as we know, the only Eredar after Thalkiel, but pre-Archimonde and Kil'jaeden, to be the student of the Fel.
Yeah.
I'm just totally side glancing here because the point of that line is she was missing when the Vindicators put me in chains. So we can assume they were a type of police
Now, did she run away? Did she portal out? We don't know.
Did she hide on Argus? Did she wait for the big green face in the sky to appear? It's kind of interesting, and you don't.
She definitely knew how to bide her time, because even though she might have been one of the first to have learned Fel, aside from directly being corrupted by Sargeras, she didn't really stand out.
No.
She's not that high ranked compared to the other Eredar.
She, what's her adventure guide says, a sadistic Eredar sorcerer, even as she understands the importance of the Nightborn to her master's plan, Talaxei chafes at the indignity of standing guard over a building full of elves. Nevertheless, she and her lieutenants remain vigilant, and while they live, no intruders will disrupt the gathering. So she's a glorified bodyguard. She's called the Emissary. She's a representation of the Legion to the Nightborn. So I guess she's pretty important, but we've never heard of her before.
That's the thing. It's like, who's she?
And it's kind of cool to see that she's got a little bit of more of a story before anyone else gets corrupted. So that was cool. But the point of that was that there are Vindicators, there are a police force. We do see Laro here, who was the Draenei in the Lords of War cinematic with Maraud. He was Maraud's boss. He was in charge. I believe he was actually called an Exarch at one point on Draenor. We never saw it in Warlords, but we saw it. It was mentioned pre-Warlords. So Laro here is present as a Echo on Argus, and he's in full Vindicator gear. So was Counselor Laro here, Chief of Police on Argus? We don't know. This next bit's really exciting, and I know Isei really wants to talk about this.
I know, we gotta. But
it's it's called the Antoran High Command, but we can call it the Argusian High Command because Antorus didn't exist back then. And everyone who's done Antorus knows the Antoran High Command. There's the three bosses, they go on the pods, and they attack you with different things. We've got General Erodus, Admiral Severax, and High Engineer Ishkar. And before I let Isei take the stage here, I like the idea of Eredar changing their name. Some Eredar changing their name when they join the Legion, and we see different Eredar doing that. General Erodus just sounds like a dark name. Erode, it's a rough sounding name, and I doubt an Eredar was named that back in the day. So my headcanon is his name is General Erodai or Erodai or something like that, something similar. And Admiral Severax, that sounds very aggressive. There wasn't a lot of X's in Eredar name, so Severa, something like that. But what's significant about General Erodai and Admiral Severa? Tell us. You and I talked about this, and it begs this very important question.
It begs this question. Why did they have these ranks? This is a high command. This is a militarized branch that Argus had. Very well established. But why? Why did the Eredar, before Sargeras, before even the Light, need an active military, an active fleet? And this is never explained. Were the Draenei attacking something, or the Eredar attacking something? Were they defending against something?
Civil war.
Was there a civil war? I mean, again, we don't know what is on the rest of Argus. We don't know if there were other Eredar settlements around. We don't know if there were other sentient races that they could have probably needed protection against. But it's just this really big, important part that is never truly explained. You don't have an active military without a reason. We understand the Vindicators, it's a police force. Civil police, let's say. But why would you have a general, an admiral, a high engineer? These are pretty heavy-duty rank.
The adventure guide description says, long ago in the golden age of Eredar civilization, a council was formed to oversee the defense of Argus and maintain peace. But
Defense of Argus against what? What were they defending against?
Maintain peace against who? Why was there no peace to begin with? Why do you need a military?
Okay, if they were trying to maintain peace, what were they conflicting against?
And I keep going back to the idea of a civil war, but it does say the golden age of Eredar civilization. So
that's their definition of a golden age.
True. Victors do rewrite history.
Yes.
But after their dark bargain was struck with Sargeras, these master technicians used their military expertise to help orchestrate a burning crusade that ravaged countless worlds. Blah, blah, blah. What's interesting is, we have general, so we have the leader of this military. We have admiral. So why did the Draenei
have a fleet?
Why do they have a fleet? Where do they go with their boats? Eredar. I'm trying to think of Eredar.
Why don't we see Eredar boats? By the way,
why aren't they floating?
Where do they float? Do they hover? I like to think that they don't actually float in the sense of what we would imagine a boat to be, but they actually kind of do hover. They use their technology to just kind of hover above the water.
Eredar skidoos.
No.
And
the
other one is High Engineer Ishkar. The Eredar create these constructs and these vigilants, but he was part of. Again,
it's more for more personal civil use.
This is him.
You don't become a high engineer because you're creating glorified Roombas.
Hey, they were important, okay?
They were important. They're still glorified Roombas.
Glorified Roombas. So the Eredar were creating weaponized constructs, weaponized creations, and they had no
Plus,
contact.
as well, they developed shield technology. You develop shields because you want to defend yourself against something.
There's mention
What's that something?
Kil'jaeden is talking about in his speech up on the seat of the Triumvirate in one of the world quests, and he talks about when Sargeras first comes to him, and there's mention of we are no longer alone in the Great Dark. So we know that they haven't gone from planet to planet. We know that they haven't really found other life outside of Argus. So there's this big question of what were they combating? What was this? Why have...
Or defending against.
There's no reason for an army unless
you're attacking or defending. That's the only reason you would have an army.
So again, another reason to go back in time. I'm just saying this list is getting heavy.
You really want to go back in time.
Hey, and you want
to take me on a magic school bus trip.
It's just going to be
back in time to Argus.
It's going to be an Aladdin carpet ride on a flying. It's going to on a magical Roomba, a whole new world, only in Draenei accents.
A whole new Draenei world.
A whole new Draenei world flown around on mechanical constructs. And then we see some counselors. We see Counselor Talgath and Counselor Hatun and the other one, Othar, which I thought was interesting that he's got the counselor title on.
But counselors, again, can also be more of a civil duty as well, especially since they had the triumvirate at the time. They were probably just fail-safes.
Othar was clearly a respected member of society in some part,
Yes.
which is why he becomes an exarch.
And they probably did the more, like cases, like judicial cases and things like that. That was probably what the counselors were for in my headspace, in my headcanon.
Definitely, because, it's not just... Every decision just doesn't fall on Velen and Kil'jaeden. There are lesser beings and...
Say, your Talbot got in, to the neighbor's yard and, who wants to pay for damages and blah, blah. Well, my neighbor built shitty fences. That's his fault.
Summon Kil'jaeden and summon Velen.
You're not going to bring Kil'jaeden into this.
Kil'jaeden.
That's probably what the counselors were for. And they probably had local counselors, too. But they probably responded to Talgath, Hatun, and Othar.
And Akama's there, but he doesn't have a title. So, Akama's still young
just Akama.
as he's just sitting there. I have this sort of headcanon that Othar was a scholar alongside Velen in that they both studied the Naru artifacts back on Argus.
We're nerding out with...
They were like, bruh, check this out. This lights up. Whoa, bro. And and that's kind of why Othar becomes the leader of the Shatari. As the exarch, that's his role.
Probably the second
Argus.
most knowledgeable on Naru artifacts aside from Velen.
And we know that Velen had the reason the exarchs were formed on Draenor is because Velen had suffered these injuries and he was having he wasn't having his visions. And so the exarch stepped up and maybe Othar was the next best thing to kind of replace Velen while Velen was recovering and stuff like that. So I have this idea that Othar and Velen were kind of school buddies, maybe not as close as him and Kil'jaeden, but school buddies in that they both geeked the hell out over Narus and stuff like that.
They're colleagues, probably colleagues of their study.
There is so much more we can talk about, but we're gonna bring it to a close here. Next episode, we're gonna continue on with talking about the introduction of Sargeras to the Eredar, what happens when they first make contact, or second contact, I guess, with the Naru, because the Naru did make contact earlier, and we could talk about those different artifacts as well. If you guys want some visual representation of these events that we talked about today, definitely check out History of the Eredar episodes 1 and 2, and hell, 3 as well, because we talk about Thalkiel and the Naru artifacts and everything. And when you guys watch these videos, look at the characters in the background, and that's one of the funnest roles that I have when making these videos is showing every character in the background has a purpose to fill. Whether you look at them or not, it's there to tell a story. And so when you're watching History of the Eredar, look in the background and see, okay, you'll see some students wearing some generic robes.
And a background is just a point of view. Just because they're not in the current spotlight or not most talked about doesn't mean their roles are any lesser.
No. And so when we have Velen center stage and he's got a big crowd around him, sure, Velen's the one you're supposed to be looking at. But if you look at that crowd, you'll notice Othar's in that crowd. You'll notice young Kil'jaeden and young Archimonde are in that crowd. You'll notice that his wife-to-be, Nuri...
Akama, a seemingly nobody at the time, who completely changed how Draenei accept a new form of power.
He's just in the background of one of our shots. So it's one of my favorite parts about doing these Lost Codex episodes. And when I tell Jeff, make sure we put Akama in the background. Akama's not doing anything. He's just standing there. He's just being Akama. But I want Akama to be there because he's a character, and it's not out of place. Why would Akama be there? Well, no, we know he was involved, but not to a huge degree, so that's why he's a background character. And I kind of set the trail for these different lead-ups, and that's what's kind of cool. So if you guys go back and watch History of the Eredar Part 1, 2, and 3 for the Lost Codex, take a look in the background, see if you recognize anyone. We'll be back with Part 2 of this whole thing, and we might continue into Part 3. We've got a lot to talk about, and we haven't even left Argus yet. This can of worms has not even come close.
We will be, I don't know if we're going to go like super chronological order, but we do want to kind of follow the Draenei's hoofsteps into what the planets they visited, what they took with them, what they learned from those new planets and how basically they evolved and where they are now.
There's and how it comes to a close and where they could go in the future. That's another big idea that we want to talk about. So rather than talk for 3 hours about this, we're going to break this podcast up. So if you like Draenei.
And I can't wait to get to Draenor because, again, for Draenei players, that was a huge thing. We're going to talk about their cities, their towns, their culture, because that was our first, before Argus, that was our first big view into Draenei culture. Auchindoun as well, Shattrath as well. And again, just a lot of cool things that I'm just leaning into my seat to want to talk about. But I can't because we don't have time.
We don't have time, but we will be back, so don't worry. Let's Talk Draenei Part 2 will be back next week.
More Draenei.
Forever Draenei. Nothing more to close with, so we will be back with next week. So we're gonna make sure we talk about Draenei next week. So we say we'll be back for week number 3. History of the Zandalari Part 2 is well into production right now. We are starting
on the way.
It is in the oven right now. Animation stage is just beginning. I just finished the audio recording for that. So if you guys are looking forward to more trolls, hang on to your seats, hang on to your butts.
And
because
more troll artworks as well, which I am going to starting to put up artwork as prints, as sellable prints for BlizzCon. So if you guys really like a piece of work that you see from any of those videos and it's like, oh man, I really want to own something like that. Well, good news is that I am going to be selling them as prints. So you can always get your hands on one of those.
I'm going to buy all of them before anyone else can.
Please buy them before Jesse does.
I cannot wait until you guys see what Isei and I have been talking about for this piece of artwork that she's doing for History of the Zandalari Part 2, the Troll and Akir Wars. It is her first piece of art was the Pterodax Rider, and gorgeous piece. This one I cannot wait. I'm actually shaking on my seat right now, back and forth.
Up just so much.
So
no pressure on my part, right?
No pressure. None
at all. None.
Zero.
I'm hyping it up so much, but no pressure.
I'll pay you the favor back, and I'll do a Draenei episode after that, so you can just go to town. You can just go to town.
I mean, I like trolls. I love trolls. I have a lot of troll headcanons, and we will get to those as well.
We will get to those one day. We're going to do a whole week of podcasts, just 7 podcasts a week. We'll call it the Headcanon Week.
One a day.
Anyway, guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Decoded. My co-host Isei will be back to talk about just everything. It's not even, she's just going to be a regular host. I have guest hosts and then I've got co-hosts, and Isei is just going to be here.
Then I'm just here.
Forever. So next week, we'll be back to talk about Draenei. Maybe Euphegenia's Stoutfire might be back. Who knows? That
I love her already.
She kind of came out of nowhere.
He did.
But you know what? That's maybe Blizzard can canonize her. Maybe we'll have
someone's gonna roll a Dark Iron Troll version.
Can we imagine an entire podcast of Euphegenia Stoutfire?
Telling stories.
Just telling stories. Or
recipes.
Or a Lost Codex episode. A holocore narrated by Grandma Stoutfire.
Grandma Stoutfire.
We'll talk about it. We'll see if she's up for it.
We'll think about it.
We'll talk to her. We'll see if she's down for it. She had to introduce the episode, but she's it's bedtime for her now, so she's gone to bed.
Okay.
All right, guys.
That's 12 minutes and she has to go to sleep.
That's it. All right, guys. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you for listening to another episode of Decoded, a Lost Codex podcast. Isei, you can close the podcast. No pressure.
No pressure. Again, no pressure. All right. Thank you guys for listening, and we will be back with more Draenei stuff, with all kinds of other stuff. Thank you for your support as well. And I can't say thank you enough. I'm just saying one thank you after another.
So many thank yous.
So many lost kudos to you guys. You get a lost kudo, and you get a lost kudo too.
Lost kudos to everyone. All right, guys. Thank you very much, and see you next week.